This week on Jerusalem Dateline, horror in Jerusalem. A mass terror attack leaves 5 dead, a city on edge, and a nation in shock.
They came in here to people who were praying and killed them while they're praying, in cold blood.
Plus, the deadline approaches for the nuclear talks with Iran. Will the West give in to the Islamic Republic?
Don't sign a bad deal with Iran that enable Iran to remain a threshold nuclear state.
And standing with the Jewish people in their time of need. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from Ben Yehuda Street, a pedestrian mall in the heart of the city. The city right now is on edge because of one of the worst terror attacks in years. 2 Palestinian terrorists stormed a Jerusalem synagogue. This amateur video shows the final shootout with police outside the synagogue.
2 terrorist Palestinians from East Jerusalem entered inside the synagogue. They were armed with knives, axes, and a pistol. The synagogue was packed at the time with people praying in peace and quiet. And as a result of this terrorist attack, where shots were fired and innocent people were sadly attacked, 4 Israelis were pronounced dead at the scene.
We go inside, we see people just laying down with this Jewish tefillin and talit covered with blood. Part of them, I'm not sure if they were shot or just cut up or, stabbed. You run from person to person, check who's alive, who's not alive. Every face you see, you hope it's not your brother or your brother-in-law, father-in-law, parents, because, we live in this neighborhood.
Residents of the quiet area, home to many English speakers, were in shock.
They came into a quiet neighborhood. It's not in East Jerusalem or occupied territories, any of that lexicon. They came in here to people who were praying and killed them while they're praying, in cold blood. People who were going to come home to take the kids to school. The kids are sitting at home or actually walking around over here wondering where their fathers are.
We would expect the world to wake up and realize what we're dealing with. Everybody expects us to do peace. To make peace, we want peace. We pray for peace 3 times a day. But at the same time, we need partners.
Hamas immediately praised the attack, calling the terrorists heroes. And while the Palestinian Authority condemned the attack, Israel's government blamed the PA for its incitement.
Ultimately, today what is needed is for the international community to unequivocally condemn the Palestinian Authority for competing with the Islamist radicals in propagating a culture of violence and hatred. That must cease immediately, and the international community must hold the PA accountable.
4 members of the Har Nof community went to pray early in the morning at the Sons of the Torah synagogue. They never came home. After the terror attack, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged a harsh response and increased security. The gruesome attack during early morning prayers rocked the nation.
We are in the midst of a terrorist assault focused on Jerusalem.
After the attack, Israel's public security minister announced he'd make it easier for Israelis to carry weapons for self-defense. It's designed to help Israelis protect themselves and also cope with the growing fear that an attack could happen anytime, anywhere.
This is my life. I live here. I can't think about it a lot because it will just stop me from going places. So I'm trying to put it behind, sort of.
The Jewish people have been going through these type of things for thousands of years already, and our only real choice is to fight the darkness with light and choose life.
The 2 terrorists were from Jabal Mukabir, an eastern Jerusalem neighborhood that gave them access to Israeli social services, the entire city and country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the terrorists were full of deep hatred and incitement against the Jewish people and the Jewish state. But he warned Israelis against taking the law into their own hands.
We're in a lengthy war against abhorrent terrorism which did not start today. Terrorism has followed us through all the years of the Zionist enterprise. We have always withstood it, and we will do so this time as well.
Following the attack, the Palestinian Authority issued contradictory messages. Some analysts believe Secretary of State John Kerry pushed PA President Mahmoud Abbas into condemning the attack. His advisor, Sultan Abu al-Anain, praised the attack as a heroic operation. And his political party, Fatah, announced they would hand out candy in celebration of the Jerusalem operation. It was the worst terror attack in Jerusalem since 2008. 4 rabbis were killed, 3 of them dual American Israeli citizens. A policeman died later from wounds sustained in the gun battle with the terrorists. Yitzhak Hesching was injured in the attack.
Everyone, everywhere is in danger, not just in Jerusalem, but everywhere. I think that what is happening is a very crazy situation.
President Obama condemned the attack and said it was a tragedy for both the U.S. and Israel. Despite what many see as Palestinian incitement, he said the U.S. wanted to help bring peace.
The United States wants to work with all parties involved to make that a reality and to isolate the kinds of extremists that are bringing about this terrible carnage.
In the meantime, Netanyahu said Israel would step up law enforcement and stiffer punishments for those who incite and increase security on the streets of Jerusalem. Israel is not only concerned about terror attacks, but also Iran's nuclear program. The deadline for the talks between Western powers and Iran over its nuclear program is coming up, and Israeli officials are concerned it could be a bad deal, not only for Israel, but for the world.
Do not sign a bad deal with Iran. Don't sign a bad deal with Iran that enable Iran to remain a threshold nuclear state.
Yuval Steinitz, Israel's Minister of Intelligence and Strategic Affairs, met with foreign reporters. He warned that Iran is not being flexible in the current nuclear talks with the West.
But on the core issue of the uranium enrichment capability, they made almost no concessions. We believe that no deal might very likely pave the way for a better deal in the future if the pressure on Iran is preserved or increased.
Steinitz said Israel's concerned Iran will try to insert loopholes in the agreement.
That Iran will try to bypass all the restrictions by cooperating with North Korea or with other rogue regimes in the future. Iran cannot be permitted to develop, to complete its R&D on more efficient centrifuges, because this is the best way to bypass the breakout time of the initial agreement. If they are not properly handled, if these loopholes are not totally closed, it enables the Iranian to bypass the agreement and to make the agreement meaningless in the future.
He also warned allowing Iran to enrich uranium will lead to a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
If Iran will be allowed to preserve thousands of centrifuges for uranium enrichment, then other countries in the vicinity will demand as is. Then Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria, Sudan, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, you name it.
Steinitz said the stakes in these talks are the future of the world.
This is going to create a new dangerous world for decades. This is really about the future of the world, not just about the future of Israel or the Middle East or about the security of Europe and the United States. This is about the future of the world. And therefore, we think that only a very good comprehensive deal will do. And we think also that the world has the capacity to compel the Iranians to agree at the end of the day for a good deal, because the Iranians need to save their economy. They badly need an agreement. And therefore, in the end, if the world will insist that Iran cannot preserve its nuclear capabilities, its dual use or military nuclear capabilities, the Iranian will have to give it away. The Iranian will have to compromise. So far, unfortunately, they made only cosmetic, minor concessions on secondary issues.
How big is Iran's new infrastructure? In other words, if they do go nuclear, how many bombs could they build?
This will give them the capability to produce dozens, between 20 and 30 nuclear warheads every year. Not immediately, but after a few years. So in a decade or so, once Iran will get nuclear, in a decade or so, they might have a stockpile of 100 nuclear weapons, and much more in the future.
He also told us that Iran's ambitious missile program put Europe and the United States in range.
Since they continue to develop, and they invest vast resources, longer-range missiles, although Israel and the Middle East are totally covered by the Shia Street, now they are investing a lot of money in order to develop missiles that can reach London and Paris, and later on intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. You should remind people in Europe and the United States that it's not just about Israel and the Middle East. They are already building missiles, ballistic missiles, that can reach Europe and America.
Coming up, an interview with Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, from our CBN News studio about the horrific terror attack at that Jerusalem synagogue.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Israel has been dealing with a string of lone wolf terror attacks this year, but this week's cold-blooded attack at a Jerusalem synagogue raised the alarm that Israelis are now at risk anywhere in their own nation. Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer joins us now to talk about this recent attack. Ambassador Dermer, Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel's response to this terror attack would be harsh. What might that response entail?
Well, I think you're going to see a very tough response because you saw a savage murder of 4 Jews while they were worshiping, while they were praying in a synagogue in a neighborhood, actually, of Jerusalem, and a Druze police officer was killed trying to help defend those people who came under attack. You'll see a very tough response because you can imagine what the response would be if people came into a church in Washington, in your capital, and started hacking people with meat cleavers and shooting them. Obviously, your president would take a very strong response. So we'll have to wait and see what that is, but he's going to have to do what he has to do in order to defend the Israeli public. And as disturbing, Mark, as those attacks were, and they're very disturbing, we were also very disturbed by the scenes of celebrations that you saw in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, where the Palestinians were holding these murderers up as heroes. And that's the problem. The world should be not only outraged by the act of violence, the world should be outraged by the reaction of the Palestinians to this act, and they should tell them in no uncertain terms that they have to stop glorifying murderers. They have to stop naming public squares after killers. They have to stop turning these people into heroes.
One of the controversial measures is demolishing the homes of terrorist families. Why do this?
Well, our security services have found over the years that that serves as some kind of deterrent against other terror attacks in the future. And we will look at every case individually, and we have a Supreme Court where people are allowed to appeal these cases. But the security services and the government that's entrusted with protecting the population has to take the steps it has to take in order to fulfill that mission. And what we found in the past is that these things do serve as a deterrent.
Ambassador Dermer, 3 of the victims were Americans, and Americans tend to think of this kind of terrorism taking place far away from the U.S. What message should Americans take away from this attack?
Listen, Mark, these terrorists are all connected. It's not that they sit in one war room. It's not that you have members of ISIS and members of Hamas and Hezbollah and Boko Haram and all the different militant Islamic terror groups in the world sitting in one war room planning attacks. But they're all motivated by the same radical ideology. And it's important to understand that when terrorism succeeds in one place, it is emboldened in every place. And when it's set back in one place, it's also set back in every place. That's why our fight is your fight. What we're fighting today, you may be fighting tomorrow. And that's why I think it's important to stand very firmly with Israel as we fight against terrorism. The people who are celebrating and rejoicing today in the savage murder of 4 Jews in a synagogue are the same people who were celebrating on 9/11 when 3,000 Americans were murdered. It's important to keep that in mind, and it's important for democratic countries fighting terrorism to stand together.
What kinds of security measures are Israel putting in place to deal with the potential for attacks like this?
Well, we're obviously going to have to ramp up our intelligence. We're going to have to keep very, very vigilant in public areas. You know, we've had to make changes over the years as we came under attack on buses and in malls and pizza shops. We took action in order to defend ourselves. At the time, a lot of people argued, look, Israel should not respond with such force because it's only going to inflame the situation. I remember, Mark, about a decade ago, after one of the worst waves, in fact, the worst wave of terrorism that we had in our history, 1 month in March 2002, we lost hundreds of Israelis to terrorism, including a very terrible attack during a Passover, this massacre at a Passover Seder. And then Israel decided to launch a very big military operation called Operation Defensive Shield, which went into the Palestinian areas in cities in Judea and Samaria, and it removed a lot of the terror infrastructure that existed there. Before that happened, people said, if you respond with military force, if you take action, you're just going to inflame the situation. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. The worst thing that you can do in the face of terrorism is to do nothing and to listen to these people who say, don't take strong action because it will just make the problem worse. You have to confront terrorism, you have to fight it, and just as we did a decade ago, I have no doubt that we will take the actions necessary to protect our people today.
All right, Ambassador Ron Dermer, thanks so much for being with us, sir, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Up next, what Israelis are feeling after the worst terror attack in years.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin said because of all the recent terror attacks, Israel might be on the verge of a third intifada. Julie Stahl asked people here on the streets how they felt about the current situation.
It's very sad right now. I actually have had a lot of interactions with Israelis, with Palestinians, and it's really sad.
All those Arab Islam fanatics are now coming against Israel with the religious war.
Do you think we're on the verge of a third intifada?
I don't know.
It's hard to know. I have the feeling it will not be an intifada in the same scale as it was last time. I think that somehow it will calm down.
It could be, but it could drag on a little.
I'm obviously concerned for our situation. I'm concerned with growing anti-Semitism in the world, especially in the media when they are reporting that Palestinians got shot in a synagogue as opposed to calling a spade, which is a terrorist attack on innocent Jews.
I'm not really afraid. It's an unpleasant situation. I've been living in Jerusalem for 30 years. And it's always up and down, up and down.
I'm not afraid, that's my town. Anybody wants to come to front to me, no problem.
The other day I was walking with my children and I saw somebody being searched at a tram stop, and that made, that was very scary. Whenever we hear ambulances running by or helicopters above, it's upsetting.
No, of course I'm not afraid, because who brought us here? We know that the Lord brought us here, back again to the land. Of course we are not afraid. Most people are not afraid.
Do you think the Israeli government's doing enough?
No, I think they could be doing a lot more to protect the civilians.
But the government should supply more security to the people.
Do you think that this is a war between Islam and Judaism or Islam and Christianity?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. It's part of it. And because there's a connections between, the religions extremists here in Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and also in the Arab countries.
President Obama is paying attention. He just has everything wrong. And I think that's one aspect that a lot of Israelis understand, is that he is a president who is not our friend. We can't trust him. And I think the American government is having problems both here in Israel and in the Middle East with ISIS as a result of this.
Coming up, standing with the Jewish people in their time of need. Finally this week on Jerusalem Dateline, many Israelis feel under assault by either Palestinian terrorists or Iran's nuclear program. but they also know that many love and support the Jewish people in both word and deed. Well, Dudley Goff, thank you for joining us here on Jerusalem Dateline.
You're sure welcome.
Yeah. And I understand you're the founder of Israel Food Outreach. Can you tell me about that?
That's right. And someone introduced me to Gleanings for the Hungry in Southern California that sends soup mix all over the world. And when I contacted them in the summer of 2010, I said, have you ever sent to Israel? I mean, there are poor people in Israel. And they said, well, no. And I said, well, would you like to? And they said, well, yes, we would. I said, let me see what I can do about it. And that fall was the first container of soup mix.
And so what have you been doing with Israel Food Outreach? What actually do you provide here in Israel?
We provide primarily here in Israel, we provide the soup mix that goes to over 60 organizations, outreach organizations in Israel that have some kind of a program for needy people.
Israel's going through a very tough time now with these terror attacks. Why is it so important, and how important is it right now to be supporting and showing love to the Jewish people?
Well, as things degenerate, and as they degenerate, the world is saying, including America, it's all Israel's fault, and the animosity against Israel, the anti-Semitism, is rising. So Jewish people here, God's covenant chosen people here, need to know that there are believers all over the world, but particularly in America, that do support them, that do want to help them, do want to bless them. And an expression of that is what we're doing with Israel Food Outreach, which now has expanded to quilts.
That's what I understand. Tell me about the quilts that you're providing for Holocaust survivors.
The quilts is a side project of Gleanings for the Hungry in Southern California, and they'd already developed such a love for Israel. I said, how about all of it coming to Israel? So they agreed to that.
And what kind of reaction have you got from Holocaust survivors when they receive these quilts?
But that quilt, when we give it to them and they just wrap it around them, I mean, it's unbelievable. The tears that come in their eyes.
In these dark days for Israel, how can people support, pray, and help the Jewish people?
Well, that's the most important thing they can do, is pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the individuals in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Israel, because it's a tough time and it's getting worse and worse. So they need God to step in, and He'll only do it if there's huge thousands, hundreds of thousands of prayers ascending up to Him on behalf of the Jewish people here.
Well, that's it for this edition. Because of the situation, I hope you'll join us in praying for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.